Welcome to our talk, Capital Investments from the Norwegian Red King Crab, a tale of ecological and community resilience. I'm Brooks Kaiser, Professor of Economics at the University of Southern Denmark, speaking for both myself and my colleague Melina Kourantidou, who is Assistant Professor at the University of Southern Denmark and researcher at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. The red king crab was introduced to the Barents Sea by Russian scientists in the 1960s as a potential new fishing resource. As the species moved west from Murmansk, agreements between the Russians and Norwegians allowed the species to spread and establish further. Experimental fisheries by both countries began in the mid-1990s, leading to commercial fishing in the beginning of the millennium. First Norway, responding to costs imposed on coastal cod fishermen by crab bycatch, and then Russia established commercial fisheries. Today in Norway, the ecological economic transformations surrounding the crab invasion include a profitable quota system in eastern Finnmark, an open access fishery aimed at controlling spread to the west, significant investment in onshore infrastructure that has resulted in more than 70% of catch being exported live in recent years, and a growing multidimensional crab tourism industry. In contrast, Russia's fishery has been offshore and concentrated amongst a few vessels with mainly onboard processing, so that the new resource has not permeated the coastal economy to the same extent. We investigate the Norwegian transformations with an eye to understanding the cascading effects to socio-ecological systems from ecosystem disruptors, in this case, a commodified invasive species. Three elements of the red king crab invasion in Norway have worked together to deepen the integration of the species into the socio-ecological system. First, there are low harvesting costs for the crab, especially in the quota-managed area in eastern Finnmark, where densities are high. Second, the damages from the invasion to the benthic habitat of the Barents and the ecosystem services that flow from it have been difficult to identify or quantify. While a number of real and potential damages have been identified, including predation on other species and increased cost to other coastal fisheries, many of these damages are not monetized, are uncertain, or are only expected in the future. As such, they do not enter the decision-making processes of many individuals either regulating or participating in the crab fisheries. Finally, while markets for the crab predate the crab's existence in the Barents, these markets have been physically distant. The biggest are in Asia. Existing Norwegian onshore processing could prepare crab for frozen markets, but the much more lucrative live markets have required considerable investment in infrastructure. Both private and public efforts have delivered this investment in search of the higher returns from live export and in response to efforts to remain coastal fishing communities, despite general declines in the Norwegian coastal fishing fleet. We investigate these three elements individually. We estimate stock-dependent average harvesting costs by first estimating a stock and seasonal dependent CPUE function from logbook data for a sample of the fleet's productivity, and then combining this with cost data from the Norwegian fleet profitability surveys to estimate a stock-dependent average cost function. Average harvesting costs are estimated to be very low, especially at the higher stock levels experienced in the quota zone. Combined with high prices for red king crab, crab can fetch over 500 Norwegian kroner per kilogram in final markets, and as shown here, the Fishermen's Association's reserve price at the dock for live crab is between 53 Norwegian kroner per kilogram for the smallest crabs, under 1.6 kilos, up to 221 Norwegian kroner per kilogram for the largest, over 3.2 kilos. Vessels have increasingly entered the quota-regulated fishery, shown as in the graph in the right, which has varied over time in its specific requirements for entry, but centers on having an address in eastern Finnmark. Separating entrance to the quota, blue line in the graph on the right, and open access, yellow line, zones, one can see that the open access zone has not seen the same rise in vessels. This pattern is also reflected in profitability in the graph on the left. Landings values and catches are currently higher in the regulated zone, with landings values shown by the rising blue line and catches shown by the gray bars, versus the unregulated zone, with landings values shown by the flat or declining red line and catches shown with the yellow bars. The spike in unregulated catches in 2008-2009 occurred as the open access fishery opened in response to a break in co-management with Russia and an effort to push the spread west down to commercial extinction. This pressure may have worked, with catches now significantly lower. At the same time, though, values in the east are higher, in part because onshore infrastructure has developed to capture rents from live crab. This fishery boon does come with ecological costs. Potential damages have been documented for several commercial and non-commercial species, including Icelandic scallop, lumpsucker, and capelin. Spawning areas in the fjords may be at highest risk, but most research funding has gone into managing the commercial crab fishery rather than documenting the baseline or the consequences of impacts from the crab's establishment in these areas. The integrated role of private and public research foci in determining the transformation path is often a significant overlooked component. In this case, for example, stock surveys and assessments have focused on the quota zone, so that the progress of the invasion in the West is mainly documented in relation to the open access market activity. This delays signals regarding the spread and promotes adaptation to, over containment of, the invasive species. These uncertain and rather hidden costs may also be amplified by the irreversibility of some of the ecological damages. In addition to converting the ecological benthic space to crab production, onshore infrastructure is growing as well. Landing sites that can store and facilitate transport of live crab to market are increasing, which we will look at in a moment. In terms of community structures, existing fisheries infrastructure is less relevant than transportation networks and quick access to the crab. So new locations like Norway king crab's troll-booked facility, shown in close-up in the photo below to show how it comprises the only activity in the bay, and zoomed out to capture its access to the road network in the upper photo, and even experimentation with mobile pickup points has developed. Mobile pickup points have, however, become associated with illegal harvests and have recently been banned. The crabs are worth much more in the market as a live product than a frozen one. The global industry structure includes a Russian Far East crab industry that remains cheap, abundant, and close to Asian markets. This means that Norway is likely to remain a marginal contributor to the global supply. So to make it worthwhile, Norway is investing significantly in making live transport profitable. Norway king crab, for example, has pioneered barcoding of the crabs with information for the end user, shown here on the right. Currently, a combination of rising incomes and declines in Alaskan crab fishery productivity keep prices and profits high, rewarding this investment. The long-term potential to maintain these price levels for a luxury good with other substitutes, including snow crab, lobster, or beef, is, however, uncertain. The number of buyers and associated infrastructure has been increasing, connecting crabs, fishermen and their boats, and transport networks. The map shows the progression of buyer locations from before 2015 to 2018. The blue squares are known buyer locations up to and including 2015 that, as you can see, for the most part, use existing road or ferry accessible locations. In 2016, locations now shown with navy triangle markers, additional buyers appear in the southwest, but also additional competition at existing buyer locations. In 2017, with buyer locations now shown with purple hexagons, more locations again show on mainly road accessible routes, while in 2018, now shown with gold circles, options show up in the southern extents, both east and west, again mainly on road networks. We now look at how connected these buyers are to see that onshore diversification is connecting Finnmark communities in new ways. The first larger scale live crab company was Norway king crab, who increased prices with barcoding and transparent supply chain information. The blue lines on the map connect landing sites that serve Norway king crab, showing how individual firm interests are diversified across the region. They are receiving crab in both the quota and open access areas. Adding the connectivity of other live crab buyers shows this diversification is common. Further, many have facilities at Alta, which has an airport and further reduces transportation times. The integration of the invasive crab into the coastal communities extends to include not just harvest and local consumption, but also tourism, where people come from all over the world to participate in crab catch and dining. This has become extensive enough that the tourism sector now receives a portion of annual quota. Furthermore, the barcoded information conveyed with crabs by e.g. Norway king crab not only contains access to the crab's characteristics like weight and location over the time from sea to fork, but also links to videos introducing the consumer to their crab fishermen and finmark more generally. The socio-ecological system itself is a significant component of both in situ and trade end products. These profitable and broadly distributed economic benefits further ingrain the transformation. Coastal communities should be optimizing the net benefits of total ecosystem productivity over time. However, the net benefits of non-market ecosystem components remain uncertain or diffuse, so they are often overlooked. Prices keep pushing up, increasing the short-run gains. Negotiating the distribution of these short-run gains amongst existing fishermen and new entrants for e.g. fishing or tourism uses may result in decisions to forego efficiency as well. Instead, path dependencies that commodify and concentrate the focus of the region on the invasive species are developing. The abundance and low harvest costs of the invader and the existing excess coastal fishing capacity have intensified this process. These support the resilient continuation of a Norwegian coastal socio-ecological system, moving away from cod in the present. But in the long run, the ecological uncertainties may reduce this resiliency. It is essential to consider the ecological and economic transformation processes as intertwined forces to improve long-run community development. Thank you for your attention. Please direct any questions to either author.